Okay, self-review and trading psychology. So how do you believe your trading psychology has been and the last couple of weeks of trading has been?
In matter of fact, I think it was quite good.
Mm-hmm.
I managed to have some good trades,
Yep.
not always, but some of them, which is
Mm-hmm.
not bad,
Mm-hmm.
at least.
Yep.
And I also managed to cut my losses.
Yep.
So I feel confident about this method and this trading plan
Yep.
and how I can still improve it to have better trades and to be more consistent.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that I still may make mistakes and some are stupid, so I really need to work on that to cut them too.
Yep. Okay.
So yes, that's approximately, and I still learn from the mistakes I make. So I'm quite happy even with the bad trades because I know I will learn something and try not to do the same mistakes again.
Okay. Okay. So somebody to sort of add to that. Of course, we on a weekly basis have our webinars that take place, right? So we do accountability sessions, market breakdown, market overview. Ron does his mind and markets, which is the psychology bit. So make sure you take part in all of these webinars and don't miss them. Try and join them live if you can, so you can interact. Um, and when you look and review your past trades, which you should be doing on a daily basis, every day review those trades. Ensure that you don't just take away the mistake and try to learn from that mistake, but take away what went well. Your trading hasn't been poor, right? Because you're pretty much break even. You preserved your capital over the last couple of weeks, right? So you should be looking at, okay, what are the things that I did well in the last couple of weeks, but then also what areas do I need to improve on? Right? Because I want you to be optimistic going forward. I don't want you to see this as a poor sort of performance or a bad result. That you should see this. Okay, I preserve my capital. I'm still slightly positive. I can do better than this. Let me focus further. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So what went well? So let's look at what went well. So good trades with a good day on Tuesday. So you've had Tuesday was your best day. Need to continue working
Yes.
through time frames to see better support from resistance levels. Okay, that's something that you're still a junior trader, so you're still working to become that consistent, profitable trader. And it's so important that you set yourself a monthly goal of how many trades you should have under your belt. Those are the milestones you should be setting yourself. I understand the targets that we've set you, but personally, what you should be setting yourself is, okay, I want to get to 100 trades. Then once I've done 100 trades, I want to get to 500 trades. Yeah, and then see that as an sort of achievement. It is an achievement, right? So once you've done 1,000 trades, that's great. We had one guy, his sole target was to get to doing 1,000 trades, having that experience. So set those, and one of the benefits from that is we can look at the statistics of all of your trades and outline how to better strategize yourself with your system going forward. Yeah. Okay, lessons learned. Entries during a trend only, preferably after the break of a resistance or support level. Okay, so your strategy is based on trendy markets only. So remember,
Yes.
one of the first things in the morning to do is you can flick through the 28 currency pairs that you're able to trade. Right, you apply the moving averages and flick through and flag out which ones are trending, which ones are not. Look at the ADX as an indicator, right? When the ADX is above 25, that's showing there's a trend intact already, right? The ADX is a lagging indicator, so it's not going to show you when the trend begins, but once the trend is in development,
Mhm.
that's when it identifies it. Use of different time frames. Talk me through this. What do you mean by use of different time frames?
So I still you are at least this week is kind of better, but I still use mainly only the 5 minute time frame and
Yeah,
not look at the 15 and the 1 hour.
yeah,
So I want to go like at least every morning on the 1 hour time frame
Mm-hmm.
to see, for instance, what is the main tendencies, what are the support and resistance, the major one that will mainly not be broken in the day,
Okay.
or probably not, and things like that. And also on the 15-minute time frame to have another view of the tendencies
Mm,
with Ciprien and Akinashi too.
mm.
That's why I want to work on.
I mean, we cover multi-time frame analysis. You're already using two time frames. To know what is the major levels of support and resistance is always the time frame above your base time frame. Okay, so if you're executing on a 5 minute time frame, then your major is the 15. If you're executing the 15 minute time frame, then the major is the 1 hour. If you're executing the 4 hour, then your major time frame is the daily. You're looking at four times using the rule of four, which I've defined. Use the rule of four to be four times higher, four times lower for your time frames to define your major and your minor trends. Okay. But yeah, that will come over time as well. That will come over time as well. Now it's important that the lessons that you've learnt in here, right, that you've outlined, you've got to work on one at a time. It's important that you work on one at a time, right? So the first thing that you should accomplish is, okay, I want better support and resistance levels. And remember, how can we confirm better support and resistance levels? Is if you trade around those support and resistance levels and the outcomes from those trades, okay? So ensure you take trades around these levels. And then come to the time frames, and then we can work on that. Stop loss moved away a few times with a review of the trade every 50 minutes or no less. So that for me is a big no-no.
Okay.
Moving your stop loss away, right? You're only incurring further losses. You're incurring further sort of risk to your account. Okay. I would rather the better way to do that is actually reduce your position size, so close a portion of the trade and then move your stop loss so that you maintain the same risk. That's the first thing you should do. And the second thing is, part of your pre-trade checklist, it's double check, double confirm whether is that the correct stop loss going forward. That's something that you should do before every single trade. Okay, I'm gonna double check my stop loss again before you even take the trade. You shouldn't be making stop loss errors once you're in a trade and then realizing after. Okay, so if you are in that and it happens, it can happen. It's happened to me, right? If that happens, then all you got to do move the stop loss and reduce the position size. Okay, so you're maintaining the same risk. So what? You paid a bit of commission. It happens. It's part of trading. Okay.
Okay. The reason is why I say that, or I wrote that, sorry, was
Yeah.
more to to see something else when I enter a trade. For
Okay.
instance, when I entered a trade, I
Yeah.
was like that way on my computer, trying
Yeah.
to see what will happen. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like loss of time on time I could focus more on other assets.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to have a 15 minutes clock
Mm-hmm.
to say, okay, I go to check every 15 minutes my trades. Once they are I open
Mm-hmm.
one,
Mm-hmm.
not to only focus on that and just like lose time trying to see what will happen on the next second or
Yeah,
minutes.
but that makes me think that because you're manually, you're reassessing the trade setup every 15 minutes, right? That's you're you're almost resetting sort of the trade setup and just saying, okay, you know what, I'll just move my stop loss like this or this or this. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I don't think um, reviewing the trade every 15 minutes may be helpful for you. You know,
Okay.
so that's something that we need to test, right? So everything we do is based on statistics, and we want to test it, right? So I want you to test that, right? How often by by you doing in trade management every 15 minutes, how profitable has that been in comparison to you maybe reviewing your trade every 30 minutes? Now let's do
Yes.
it where we could see, when you're doing in-trade management every 15 minutes or every 30 minutes. What's your holding period? How long are you holding a position for, on average?
Um, on my trade rotor, the average is something about 2 hours. Something
Two
about
hours.
2 hours.
Okay, 2 hours. So,
Yes.
yeah, I mean,
Yes.
2 hours.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, 15 minutes doesn't sound that bad. Reviewing it every 15 minutes doesn't sound that bad. It's not overly sort of, that's fine. But again, it's something for us to test going forward, right?
Yes.
We can come back to that later. I'm not too concerned about that yet. My concern is obviously the first thing is, applying support and resistance correctly. That's those areas that you want to work on first. And then we can move on to work on the time frame analysis, and then we can review your stop loss and having the correct time period that you can carry out your in-trade management as well. Yeah? Okay, so the goals for next week. Okay, so looking to have more trades with better entries. That's great. Okay, so on average, you're doing 2 to 1 trades. Okay, 1 to 2 trades per day. Maybe increasing the amount of trades that you take, especially that you're a short-term day trader, may allow you to see a much larger profit. But it can also be seen as a way you can be at more risk as well. So it's something to assess. Generally, as a day trader, I would want you to take more trades, most definitely, because I think if you had 2 losses in a row and then you're done for the day, that's it. You come out the next day and try again. You're going to feel a little bit defeated almost because of the prior day, right? Whereas if you take 3 or 4 trades a day, the 2 trades you've taken losses initially, you can recover those losses on the next trade or the 4th trade, right? So
Yes.
it allows you more opportunity to come back from a loss as well. Okay. Reward line. So decide if it should be on the next support resistance or the next major one to improve the reward to risk ratio. Yeah, I mean, to improve your reward to risk ratio, you would need to look at better in-trade management, right? So I would always want to set a realistic target and then aim for that target, but also set maybe T2 and T3, so multiple targets. And then as you start to see price coming closer to those targets, you start to extend the next target.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And
Yeah.
maybe like close half the trades or one part of the trades.
I'm against taking partial profits. I'm against partial profits, and I'll tell you
Okay.
why. Right? I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do, and if it's something that you want to do, you could do, right? But suppose you're 50% of the way to your target. You close your position by half. When you get to your target, you're not going to make the same amount as your initial defined reward. You actually make less. Right. The only time you should take partial profits if you're already up 2 to 1 and your stop loss is at 2. You've locked in 2 over the one that you risked. Right. Thereafter, then you can start taking partial profits. But if your reward to risk is just over 1 to 1, I wouldn't even do partial profits. You will always end up having larger losses and smaller gains, smaller wins. So that concerns me. Yeah, so that's something for you to consider.
You think it could be okay to have like 1 to 1 or for the first target?
Well, that's the minimum, right? So each, from
Yes.
your back testing and your strategy, you should know is that what's been your average achieved reward to risk ratio, right? And from there, that will sort of define, okay, on the average has been say 1.5 to 1. So that means you're always sort of looking to target around 1.5 to 1. If it gives you more,
Okay.
that's great. That's wonderful, right?
Yes.
But I wouldn't be looking for less than 1.5 to 1 then. So look at
Yes.
the numbers. Look
Okay.
at the numbers. Yeah.
Because for now, I try to enter only if my initial or is above 2 to 1.
Yeah.
But maybe I can go a bit less to 1.5, 1.6, 1.7 to
So
1.
the balance is right. The balance between that is that by reducing the reward to risk ratio, that will give you more trading opportunities,
Yes. Yes.
right? So if that's what you're looking to do, then do that, right? And
Okay.
let's see how that works for a couple of weeks. Maybe you're much more profitable doing it that way, right? And if it doesn't work, don't worry. We'll come back and we'll revert back to sort of what we're doing now and form a different plan. right? But
Okay.
I want
So
to see you trading a little bit more actively.
yes,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
understand. Okay, I try to do that to have like something about 3 or 4 trades. Because every day there's like, okay, I can have this trade, but
Yep.
the OOO is too small,
Yep.
so I don't enter the trade, and maybe it could be good one, or I could have earned some money, even if it's not like 30 or 40 dollars.
Yeah, so I mean, as a trader, you're always balancing, you're balancing risk against the probability of that setup, right? If you really believe there's, the probability of setup, which should never be 100%, it's never a sure thing. It's going to be, it could be 50%, it could be 80%. How much belief you have in that setup, you've got to weigh out with the risk that you're taking, right? So, and that includes reward to risk ratio. So. Yeah, I think reduce the reward to risk ratio as a minimum that you're looking for. Take
Yes.
more trades, and maybe that's another way of us coming out of that. Well, you're not in a drawdown, but I mean, what I want you to do is a target that you should set yourself is to sort of break through the previous high, right? So that should be the minimum. You should be looking
Yeah,
to, break through that previous high now.
this is now broken
Yeah.
these days, so
Okay.
I'm about to the same one. I
Yeah,
just
you're not
broken
far off now. You're not far
this
off.
day.
Remember something that you've been doing great is preserving capital. So I don't want you to become overconfident either. So go in focused. Always self-evaluate. Always self-evaluate. And yeah, let's catch up in a couple of weeks for another sort of session, and let's see
Yes.
where you are.